Hi guys, and welcome to another worked example. This is a game that I played earlier on today, and I thought it was a really good example of the importance of developing your pieces and getting all of your pieces involved in the game. So I'm playing as white. My opponent is Fela27 from Canada, and I open with e4, which I've been doing at the moment. He responds with e6, which is the Pirc defense. Seeing as he's not challenging for that center, I thought I might as well go for the double with the d4 to follow up. And again, he plays another very quiet move with d6. So I figure, why not keep going? Why not just bring pieces out, try and dominate that center? So I bring out my queen's knight. And then another quiet move, another pawn just moving, onto the 6th rank. So he's really playing very much on the back foot. Maybe he's trying to get me to overextend. I don't know what. Don't know what he's doing at this point. So I'm thinking that the way things are looking, he's most likely to want to castle on the king side. So I'm thinking that these two pawns in the middle at some point are going to resolve, and that there may be a way through. So I'm thinking, let's fianchetto my dark squared bishop onto b2, with the idea of lining up some attacking possibilities for the future down on black's king side. Again, another really quiet move. My opponent almost isn't. It's like in boxing, he's just dancing around me. There's no contact going on yet. So I go ahead with the fianchetto. So I've now got two minor pieces off the back rank developed. Okay, black currently has nothing. He's had 4 moves, and he's moved 4 squares with pawns. Now he develops a knight, but again it's very closed in. He's moved it in front of his light squared bishop. Also taken an option away from his queen. So I carry on. I'm thinking, let's commit to lining up against black's king side of the board. And then black, it's almost like he's just running around the boxing ring. He's the one piece that he's developed, he's now moved it again, and you can see that there's nothing. There's still nothing has gone further than the 6th rank. So he really is just playing on his own side of the board right now. I decide to bring the queen out. That's going to enable my king to castle long if I choose to do that, which I think I probably am. There's a lot of material there in front of my king, keeping it relatively safe, and I am banking on launching an attack down the king side of the board. Black again, moves one of his other knight now sideways. Okay, so what's he got? He's got 2 minor pieces. That's it. That are off the mark. I've got 3 minor pieces and my queen off the mark. My pawns are further forward. I am literally occupying a lot more of the board. If we look at the squares in front of my pieces that are controlled, there's a lot of squares. So all of these are in my control potentially. Whereas black is, very much still holding back. And this is what the important thing here is to watch how the game develops, and to see the opportunities that arise or don't arise because of this slow development. Okay, so I go ahead and castle, and black finally makes a foray onto the 5th rank, which is what I expected to happen. One of these pawns would have to break forward at some point. I didn't really want to be the one to do it. So he pushes e5. That obviously there's then a discovered attack from his bishop against my queen on g4, so I have to move the queen. There's no real attacking possibility. I mean, there's a chance that I could have moved the queen maybe there to h5, but we'll see. But I decide to move the queen backwards. Again, another sideways move, very slow move with the knight. So if you look at the board again, I've got two pieces that have not yet developed. I've got my knight on g and my rook there on h. Everything else is involved in the game. Every other piece has got a job. This rook on d1 has got options of swinging round. But look at black's pieces. Both of his rooks and both of his bishops are still in the starting blocks. I capture on e because I'm thinking if black recaptures, then with a pawn I've got ideas of discovered attack. Maybe double attack there by putting the king in check, and also with a discovered attack on the queen. But black actually recaptures with his knight, attacking my light squared bishop. And at this point, I'm still thinking about where am I going to attack? How can I attack down that king side? I ignore the attack on the light squared bishop, and I come in with my knight, thinking if we exchange knights on here and my e pawn goes up, that's no bad thing. It's clearing the e file completely, so a rook can come along and pin the knight or whatever. Black takes, I recapture with the pawn, so it's all going nicely. Black now captures the bishop with his knight. Now, I think this is one of those key points in the game, and I spent some time preparing this. I was thinking about it quite a lot actually while black was thinking about his move. Because I think this was a 30-minute each way rapid game, so we had plenty of thinking time. So my thought process is that I would recapture with the rook if he went for the exchange. I certainly don't want to recapture with this pawn. That would be silly, because I'd have doubled isolated pawns then on the d file, and my king would now be exposed. Okay, which is not my preference. Also, I mean, it's very obvious to think, we can recapture with the queen. But I'm thinking the queen's doing a job. The queen is actually looking down on this pawn on g7. And what that means is that the bishop that's on f8 then is tied down to the defense of that pawn. If black has any ideas of castling kingside, he's going to have to move that bishop out the way. But he doesn't really want to be moving this pawn forwards. You really don't want to move pawns in chess unless you've got a very, very good reason to do it. So I'm thinking, okay, we can capture with the rook here, because the queen's already got a job. So I take that with the rook. Now black plays another quiet move, and this is a really poor move. He's moved the f pawn, and there's a saying in chess, the f pawn stands for the forget about it pawn. You really don't move the f pawn, particularly early on in the game, and particularly if you haven't castled yet. My f pawn is not so much of an issue because my king's over there on c1. His f pawn was protecting his king. Okay, so now I spot an opportunity. I see my chance. Dive in with the queen. There's no piece that can get in the middle of this, so it's going to force the king to move. The king actually only has two places he could go. It could have been there on d7, or he could have gone to e7. So he decides to go for d7, and look now how my pieces start to converge on this and really put unbearable amount of pressure on black. Okay, so now I think, okay, there's no rush. That king isn't going anywhere. You know, this nice pawn here on d5 is preventing the king from going onto those two light squares. The king can't go there. So, and there are no threats, right? Black has not developed any of his pieces. That light squared bishop can't even move one square. His dark squared bishop can move one square only. Both rooks have got there's the opportunity for movement. The control of the board that black has here is almost non-existent. It's about as bad as you can get. So, I mean, I don't know what black's strategy was with playing all these very slow, quiet moves, but it's not working out for him. So he decides to move his bishop in front of the king. Okay, this now means that the king doesn't actually have any squares to go to. And then I swing my rook around. Okay, both my rooks are now involved in the game. This dark squared bishop fianchettoed there on b2 hasn't really played a part in the game yet, but it certainly will. Okay, black decides to move his queen across. What this does is it gives the king one possible square to move to, I guess. I snatch the spare pawn, and now I've got queen and rook looking at this bishop on e7. The bishop is pinned to the king. Black decides just to push another pawn, and then in comes my bishop. That bishop was the only piece defending the pawn on f6, but of course the bishop is pinned, so the pawn was actually on pre. I could just dive in and take it. Black moves across, maybe thinking with ideas of exchanging queens, exchanging bishops, and somehow rescuing the situation. There isn't a huge material difference here. There's 2 material points. I am only 2 pawns up in this game. Okay, I have pawns on f and g, and black doesn't. That's the only difference. Okay, but having a dominant position in chess is only slightly about material. It's all about what your material's actually doing. And black's material, the material that he has, is doing very, very little. These 3 pieces aren't even involved in the game, and that one is pinned. So at this point, I don't want to exchange queens. I don't want to simplify the situation. I've got lots and lots of options. I could have just captured the rook at that point as well, maybe exchange queens then, but you know, I want to go in for the kill. I want a checkmate. So this is a really desperate situation now for black. Basically, he's got 2 options. One is to move the king to d8, in which case he's going to get checkmated, whatever happens. And the only other option is to capture the rook with the queen. But in fact, what black did at this point is just sit and do nothing for about 10 minutes and then lost via abandonment. So, which is not very sporting of him, but it was completely lost. So, if the king went to d8, then I've got, you know, rook there wins the queen, basically wins the game. You know, so he'd be in check there. The only move would be that, and then this is pretty much winning, you know. And there you go. That would be checkmate. The only other move would be queen takes rook, and then queen takes queen, also checkmate. So, you know, if we just go back to the start again quickly, and just we'll play through quickly and see how many moves it takes me to get the majority of my pieces involved in the game, and how black just simply fails to do it. So now I've got 2 minor pieces involved. That knight really isn't very involved yet. In comes another piece. The knight is starting to take an interest in the game. The queen dives in. You know, now I castle. That frees up one of my rooks. and that then allows me to push on and grab this pretty rapid victory and close out the game. So yeah, I think that was an interesting game. I hope it was interesting for you as well. Certainly there's a lesson in there for me. I'll see you next time.